Hello Econ fans, here to go over worksheet number 16. Again, you've submitted it, you've got the credit for it, but it can be a little bit tricky, again, the first time you see the concept of externalities, and so I want to make sure you have a chance to understand it as I go over it. So, the first thing you definitely have to know is the definition of a positive externality. Okay, the idea is pretty simple. It's the idea that you do something, but somebody else benefits. Okay, you do something, you produce something, but somebody else benefits. Now, it's not to say that you don't benefit at all. You may get a benefit, but you're not going to get as much benefit as the rest of society does. Okay, so what is a good example of a positive externality? One of my favorite ones, of course, vaccines. Okay, relevant topic given what's going on nowadays. So think about it this way: if you get a flu shot, maybe no one else in your family gets a flu shot. Okay, but you get a flu shot. Okay, how do the people around you benefit? Okay, think about that. That's right. So think about it. If you are less likely to get the flu, then they are less likely to get the flu from you. So maybe they didn't get a flu shot, but they benefited from the fact that you did. Okay. Another example of a positive externality. Back in, I think, the maybe late 80s and early 90s, cars started to get outfitted with LoJack. LoJack was a GPS device that could locate your car. Of course, GPS nowadays is child's play. Back then, it was a pretty big deal, and not a lot of cars had it. But here's the thing: car thieves did not know which cars had LoJack and which ones didn't. And so, whether or not your car had this little GPS device on it that could locate it, you benefited from the fact that it made stealing a car a little bit riskier. And actually, what police departments were doing is they would if a car got stolen, they would follow it all the way to, say, the chop shop, and they would bust entire rings of car thievery and whatnot. And so a lot of people benefited from the fact that some cars got this device on their car, but they didn't, but they still benefited nonetheless. The older I get, the more I think of education as a positive externality. If you get an education, it clearly benefits you. Statistically, you're much more likely to get a well-paying job and have a good career and everything else, but it also benefits society, right? Because if you have a good, productive job, you're not being a leech on society, but you're also going to be productive, and you may go on to change things for the better, like many people have done. And so you're getting an education that's benefiting you. It's also benefiting a lot of people around you. Okay, so those are examples of positive externalities. Now, here's the question: which will be higher when dealing with a positive externality? The net direct benefits to the person who engages in the activity, or the overall benefits to society? Well, remember, it's going to be the overall benefits to society, because the individual does not receive all the benefit. There are other people out there that benefit as well. So, if you're labeling our graph, and I want to make this clear, on your test, you will not have to do this graph. Okay, it's just to help you visualize what's happening and help see the numbers. If you're in my AP Econ class, you'd have to do externality graphs. You do not. Okay, bottom line is, though, remember, you've got your cost curve, which is the same as your supply curve, and then you're used to calling this the demand curve, but it also can represent the benefit curve. So the question is, which was higher? Okay, and we said a moment ago that society's benefits are higher. So the red line on my board represents we'll call it the social benefit. Okay, those are the benefits that society gets. And the individual, however, he gets the green line, which is what's called the private benefit. Okay? Now, if you know how to label this graph, the rest of it's pretty simple. Okay? So based on the social benefits, in other words, based on the red curve, which is the social benefit, and the cost curve, how much does society want? Society looks at this and says, hey, we want you to make or do a quantity of 6. Okay, so based on society's benefits, which is the red line, and the cost curve, they want 6. The individual, however, looks at this and says, you know what, I'm only going to make decisions based on what I'm doing. By the way, there's an E at the end of private. I'm spelling it right. But I want to do decisions based on what's best for me, and so I want to stop right here. Okay, because the individual, he's most concerned about his benefit curve, which is the green one, and the cost curve, so the individual only wants to do 5. Now, think about this. So society wants 6 units. The individual only wants to do 5. So here's the key. If the individual is making his own decisions, is he going to produce more or less than society wants? Society wants 6. He's only going to do 5, so he's going to make less than society wants. Okay, so the problem, and there's the fancy word for that, economic word, is under allocation. Okay, the problem with positive externalities is under allocation. Okay, if people are left to own devices, they're not going to do it as much as they should. People aren't going to get vaccinated like they should unless there are mandates in place. People aren't going to get as much education as they should unless there's a requirement that you get education at least up to a certain age or up to a certain point, and things like that. So we want to encourage more people to do this. So think of it from the government's perspective. You want to encourage more people to do this. Would you want to tax the behavior or give a subsidy? Now, subsidy might be a new word for you. Basically, that's where the government pays you to do something. So again, the government wants people to do more of it. How do they encourage them to do more of it? You offer them a subsidy by paying them to do it. Okay, maybe they'll do it more. Good example of this, obviously, if we become more efficient in how we use energy, we become less energy dependent and this and that. There are benefits to everyone when we use energy more wisely. So the government has said if you buy an electric vehicle, if I can speak, a fuel efficient car, if you install energy efficient windows in your house, or an energy efficient furnace or air conditioner, or buy new energy efficient appliances, things like this, we're going to give you tax breaks. Okay, we're going to give you money back in your taxes. That's the same as a subsidy because they want to encourage more people to purchase fuel-efficient vehicles or electric vehicles and make wise decisions with how they use energy in their homes and things like that, because it doesn't just benefit that person because they pay less for gas or they pay less for electricity or whatever. It also has benefits for the entire society. So that's a great example of using subsidies in order to increase the behavior. So bottom line is 3 things you need to know, okay, about positive externalities. Number 1, what is a positive externality? Somebody does something, but other people benefit. Okay, number 2, make sure you know the problem with positive externalities, and that is the problem of under allocation. People tend to not do it enough. Number 3, what's the solution? The government tends to offer subsidies, okay, by giving people money, encourages them to do more of it, and hopefully fixes the problem. Ideally, if you're looking at the graph, again, you don't need to know this, they're trying to increase the benefit for the individual so that his benefit matches society's, and now he wants to do exactly what society wants. That would be the goal. Again, you don't need to know the graph, but sometimes it helps to visualize it. All right, let's look at negative externalities. Negative externalities, kind of the opposite of what we just said. Make sure you know the definition, which is right here. That's when somebody does something, but other people pay the costs. Okay, you do something, but somebody else pays the cost. What are some good examples of negative externalities? It could be things like pollution is a classic example. I own a business, and in the process of producing my product, I am polluting the air, or I'm polluting the water supply. And so I'm making money by creating this product, and yet the rest of the people in my community are breathing in dirty air. They're getting sick more often. I'm killing the fish in the water system, and so it's hurting the fishing industry. So I'm doing the activity, other people are paying for it. It could be things like food fights in the cafeteria, right? What's the problem with food fights? People who aren't engaged in the activity often get shirts ruined or pants ruined, and then a janitor has to clean up the mess. So somebody has done the activity, somebody else is paid for it. Other things that are illegal, obviously, like murder and stealing and drunk driving. These are people, you're engaged in the activity, other people are paying the cost, and so we don't like those things. So those are all good examples of negative externality. Now, in this case, it's a difference in costs, okay? So what's going to be higher, the cost to the person or the overall cost for society? And again, the answer is the overall cost to society, okay, are going to be higher because, again, the individual's doing it, but they're not paying all the costs. So if you're looking at the 2 curves here, again, you've got your benefit curves. In this case, is the difference in costs. The social costs are going to be higher because they're paying things that the individual is not. The social costs are going to be higher than the private cost. The private cost represents for the individual. Okay? So, again, now that you've got it labeled, it's pretty simple. You just have to ask the question, okay, based on the supply and demand curves, how much does society want? Well, society says based on our green cost curve and the benefit curve, we want this to be done at a rate of 5, or a quantity of 5. The individual, however, looks at his costs and benefits and he's like, I'm not paying the cost. I don't care, I'm gonna go ahead and do it. And so based on his cost curve, he wants to do 6. Okay, so again, this is why we have regulations about things like pollution, about things like drunk driving, we have rules against things like food fights in the cafeteria, because if you're not paying the cost, you don't care, you're gonna go ahead and do it. And the reality is, are you gonna do it too much or too little? And the answer is too much, okay? So the individual, society only wants 5, the individual though is gonna do it 6. So the problem is, he's gonna produce more than society wants. And again, there's a fancy word for that, and that's called over allocation. Okay, the individual does it more than they should, and they over allocate. Okay? Now, if the problem is people are doing too much of it, and the government wants to discourage it, do you think they're going to pass a tax or a subsidy? Oh, very good. They're going to pass a tax. Okay, because taxes, people don't like taxes, so taxes. So if you pollute, you pay fines. If you drink and drive, you lose your license. And on top of paying fines, maybe having jail time, things like that. Some things, again, now, some things we just make illegal outright, like murder and stealing and whatnot. It's not like you pay a fine or a fee, it's just illegal, and you can spend jail time. But other things, we're gonna put taxes on cigarettes, for example, because if more people smoke, it creates negative externalities for the people around us because we're breathing in that smoke, okay? Now, fun fact, teachers and coaches love negative externalities. You ever heard a teacher say, if one more person talks, the whole class has a writing assignment? Or a coach, if one person's late, the entire team runs, right? They're trying to use negative externalities to discourage the behavior so that people have that pressure of, I don't want to make the entire team run, then they're all going to hate me. Or I don't want to make the entire class do a writing assignment, then they're going to be mad at me. So they're trying to use that as pressure using negative externalities. So again, 3 things you need to know about negative externalities. Number 1, what it is. Where you do something and somebody else pays the cost. Okay, you're not paying all the costs. Number 2, the problem, which is over allocation. Okay, if you leave people to their own devices, they're going to do it more than they should. Number 3, what is the solution? The solution is a tax, other than making it just illegal. Okay, so you're going to tax it to discourage the behavior, so hopefully people do less of it. Okay, that's externalities. Again, that's the 4th thing that everyone would agree, yes, the government, it makes sense. Again, the free market, what we're trying to show is that the free market does not do a good job with externalities. If left to their own devices, people are either going to do too little, like they would with positive, or too much with a negative, and the government can come in and try to help correct those markets and help fix them and improve them. So that's externalities. Again, any questions, let me know. As always, be happy to help. Otherwise, I hope you all are doing well, and I miss you guys, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.